Welcome to the Above and Beyond Recovery Podcast, where we explore recovery and its relationship to faith, family, work, community, and health.
Well, hello and welcome to the Above and Beyond Recovery Podcast. I'm your host, one of the three hosts today of our episode. I'm Amber Didden.
I'm Bryan Cock.
I'm Shawn Ryan.
And we are all together today to talk about our season 1 recap. We have filmed and posted several episodes so far, and we're about to move into a new season. Got some exciting things on the docket, but we wanted to take a minute and talk about what we've discussed so far. I know some of you have been along with us for the entire ride from the first episode up until now. Some of you maybe are just tuning in and hopefully binging all the episodes at once. So we just wanted to talk about the things that maybe stood out to us, the thoughts that have been rolling around in our heads since we've recorded these episodes, and just kind of recap. So I'll start with you, Bryan. What kind of stands out to you from the episodes that we've recorded so far?
Yeah, well, honestly, there's a lot that stands out to me because even though I've been in ministry for over, almost 40 years, you are learning a lot about addiction. And I think one of the things that I think about, and not sure how our listeners feel about this, but I'm sure it would be similar, is that one of the things that really holds us in addiction is isolation. And feeling alone and I think that leads to a lot of the hopelessness. And so I think it's just been great having guests on, hearing their story, and people being able to say, okay, my story may not be exactly like their story, but I connect with it. I understand whether it's the person battling addiction themselves or a family member that's done that. So I've been really encouraged just hearing stories, hearing people talk about their journey to freedom. And that's just been really exciting for me. And I'm sure for those who do listen, it's an powerful encouragement to them. So, there's a lot of things I'm thinking, but that's one that really stands at the front for me.
Yeah, I think too, as we've been reaching out to guests for the show and having different people on the show, I think I assumed that the guests that we had would have some kind of familiarity with addiction or be seeing it a little bit in their communities, but I've just been blown away by how the people we've talked to have been like, this is a huge problem. This is a huge deal. So many people I know are dealing with this. So many people in our community. Like when we did the episode about homelessness with Hope Rescue Mission, he said 90% of the people in the mission are struggling with addiction in some capacity. And again, like I knew it was a lot, but 90%, I don't think I was prepared for that.
Yeah, and I might just add and then maybe kick it to Shawn, because when you say that, that's exactly right. For me, it's like, it's not just addiction. Addiction is tied to our life and our money and our relationships and our communities. And the same way, I thought, wow, how powerful to know that it's not just this isolated thing in our life, but it has these tentacles that really go out. And the good thing is when healing comes and freedom comes, that's what brings the hope, because now it not only brings freedom in the individual from the addiction physically, but emotionally, relationally, financially, and in our communities. So that's such a great thought. Yeah, for sure. And I guess that would be I'll kick it to you, Shawn. You've been through the program. You're on the journey of recovery. You've seen those pieces of your life and those that you now serve just come back. I often say, addiction robs us of our gifts and what our calling in life was. And you've experienced that and you see it. So I'd like to hear your thoughts on that.
Well, I've been doing some binging, some binging of our podcasts, and I would say I think the one that I think is the most impactful and the most important would be the one with Dave Lewis.
Yeah. So good.
First of all, Dave's great.
Yeah.
And if anybody actually knew Dave prior to Teen Challenge, you would not believe he is who he is today, right? Dave thought he was Jesus at one time, strung out on all those.
It's not funny, but it is. Funny.
Right. Yeah. There's some weird humor in there with that. Yeah. And as you get to know Dave, that's why it's funny, right?
That's right.
But I think his methodology and his idea of what addiction is and how to prevent relapse and prevent addiction from really grabbing hold of somebody is so well done. He articulates so well.
He really does.
He understands it. And he does a great job of splitting the difference of where faith lies in it and where the clinical lies in it. Like he really grasps both those.
Well, I was going to say too, like there's a depth in both of them,
Correct,
I think one of the criticisms that can surface sometimes is either you're too too far. I'm putting
That's
air
right.
quotes on that. Too far on the faith side or too
Yeah.
far on the clinical side. But there's a depth that can be found in both, and I think
That's right.
Dave does that really well. And that episode was a great balance between those two things.
Yeah, and
Totally agree
he
with
taught me
that.
a lot. One of the things I like that he always says is, people they start doing well in their life because they're not using drugs anymore, and yes, God is a part of that, but Dave also says, listen, man, that's just one of the byproducts of actually not using drugs anymore.
Yeah, that's right.
Like yes, God's in it, but there's more to God than just this. This is a byproduct of you just doing well
That's right.
and not using drugs anymore.
Yeah.
So if you haven't heard that one, I would say
Yeah, and I
Definitely.
would just add to what Amber said, because I felt too, I had the privilege of being the one hosting Dave, and it was such a great bringing together, because in ministry, I've seen that where it's all faith and it's all God, and, no on the clinical, no on the medical, or the other way where it's that and, not God. And I thought it's a perfect blend of bringing those two things together, because in addition to sobriety, we need Christ. I mean, even if you're clean and you're on that journey, there's a lot more to life than just being sober. And I thought Dave did a great job presenting
Most
that.
definitely. And I think the one with the Hope Rescue Mission, that excites me because we're actually working with the Hope Rescue Mission, and they understand the methodologies of why it's important to have like some clinical and medical stuff involved with faith as well, because they can only provide so much, and they do a great job, but they want to do more than just be a place for people to come get a meal to eat. Obviously they want them to receive the Lord and find Jesus, but they also want them to get them in recovery, and we're partnering with them to provide the recovery aspect of it, the clinical aspect, the counselors and things like that. And for me, just to see organizations starting to like realize like, okay, we're not in competition with Teen Challenge.
Right, it's the kingdom of God.
That's right. We're all trying to accomplish the same goals, the same mission. So how can we work together? And we have, Hope Rescue Mission has resources that they can use, and they have, and we have resources that we can use, and together, we can do so much
It's
more.
that picture of wholeness, right? Like
It's exactly what I was
it's not
thinking.
just the faith thing, the clinical thing, the addressing the homelessness or the church, or it's not any of these one components. It's all of those things coming together to find wholeness in a individual person, in a family, in a whole community.
And that's why I think we need to come together, because, we often hear the phrase, stay in your lane. Well, like in the church world, when I pastored, it can always be salvations and souls. But there's more to wholeness than that. I mean, and thank God for that. I mean, salvation is big, yes, but we're body, soul, and spirit. And so there is a physical dimension. There's housing, like when you said Hope Rescue, it's good to see all these groups and organizations, ministries coming together to bring that wholeness.
There was a conversation that Heather and I had in our episode about marriage, just about, because Heather and I have both been the wife who had a spouse who was struggling, and we kind of played with this idea of like, if that wife is in your church congregation and she's telling you like, my husband is really struggling and I don't know what to do, like, how do we help her as a church family or just as a community? And Heather and I were both saying like, it's the practical things. You can help her by saying like, I will watch your kids twice a week, or I will make you dinner 3 times a week, or whatever it is, or like, I'll have you guys over so that when your husband goes to treatment, like, we got you, like, we got all the physical needs taken care of for you. Like, those tactical physical things are so important.
Yes.
And the therapy is important, and all of that is important too. But when it comes down to it, like, to survive, to thrive, you need the food, you need the shelter, you need the financial stuff taken care of.
Yeah, and I think that's one of the big advantages of Above and Beyond podcast, because just the conversation, just again hearing you say that, like, those can be just walk away things. I think it seems so simple, but we often forget that, and it's those are practical ways that we can provide help. And I think one of the other things that I've learned through is just the understanding of it. We understand what we've been through, but when all the different guests, all like when Randy Doty was on here about grief, I mean, there was like so much helpful stuff, and we tend to be smarter together and stronger together. There is community. And I think just having the conversation, you're driving down the road and you're listening, who doesn't know someone that's battling addiction. I mean, addiction affects us all more than just drugs and alcohol. There's a lot of addiction in our culture, and there's so many good things to have conversation about and learn from each other. Yeah.
You know, you brought up that episode about grief, and one of the things we didn't even get to touch on in that episode, and I hope we either can have Randy back or explore this
sure
with
we
another
will.
guest, but one of our clinicians here was telling me that people who are in recovery go through the stages of grief over their addiction. Like they grieve their addiction, and all the phases of grief that we talk about when you lose a loved one
Yeah.
are the same that you
Yeah.
feel when you are like actually grieving the loss of
Right.
your use of that drug. And you know, Randy said that how did he phrase it, that the dark side of love is grief.
Yeah, that's right.
And that, I mean, that's kind of the same
it's a
thing. Like
part
you
of
you
it,
end up loving your addiction,
Mm-hmm.
and then you, of course, you're going to go through that grief process. So that was eye opening to me, and we didn't even get to talk
Yeah,
about
the
that
whole
in that
steps of it,
episode.
denial and bargaining, and there's a whole process just
Right.
in that.
Yeah, that's pretty funny because Chris Richard, who I had on, which by far is the best episode, by the way, so it's mine. We actually just talked about that. It's so funny that you say that. We were just talking about that because Chris is he's graduated our program, he interned, he's working now, and he's starting to live life without the use of drugs,
Right.
and he's having to start to deal with life on life's terms, and he's getting married, so there's a lot of stress for that. And we sat down and we were processing through things, and he says, I think one of the things I'm having a big problem with is I'm grieving. And I said, well, what do you think you're grieving? And he goes, I think I'm grieving that, one, I don't have the ability to just use now. Like, this was my out. It was my way of
Yeah.
dealing with life. And I'm also now grieving, and he's probably be mad that I said this, but I have to share my life with somebody else now. Like now I'm getting married. So before,
Yeah.
because when we're in addiction, we're very selfish.
Yeah.
It's all about us. It's all about what we can
And
get,
you're
what we can
married to
have.
that substance.
And you're married to the substance. So now he's divorced from that substance, divorced from himself, and now opening himself
Wow.
up to his wife, to his future wife, and to life with her, and sharing of money and all these things. And he's like, man, I'm like, it's funny that you say grieving, because he's kind of going through this grieving
Wow,
process.
good for him for
Yeah.
being insightful.
I was very impressed. I said,
Yeah.
man, that's like, I said, I don't know if I'm counseling you, if you're counseling me, because that was really
and
good.
that's big, for our listeners, because one of the biggest terms that I've learned being associated with this ministry, being on the staff, are the triggers. And I think Dave Lewis mentioned it in his relapse session. And we all face that. It could be food. Cheesecake could trigger something in your life. You know what I mean? I know with me, being addicted to tobacco for years. I was a baseball player, chewing tobacco. And of course, now been clean from it for how many years? Snuff, leaf tobacco, all of it. But I guarantee you, we're right now in the MLB playoffs, and turn on the TV, and you don't see it as much as you did years ago. In fact, in the minor leagues now, you get fined if you are chewing tobacco because they made changes. But when you do see it, I got to say this, after pastoring, knowing God for all those years, that's a trigger where I lean forward and say, yeah, I remember what that tastes like. So, I think understanding those triggers, and for our listeners, no matter what we all battle. It's part of the fallen nature, right? It's so good.
I haven't smoked a cigarette since 2013. But like the other day, I was at the grocery store, and I'm putting groceries in the trunk, and all of a sudden, I just catch like some downwind whiff of like a cigarette. Now, usually they stink to me, but every now and then, I'm like, and it's just like, wow.
And
it
it's
smelled
that-
good, and my mind was like, bam, like automatically, like, go get that.
And it's that rhythm of life, like with me, and again, I think addiction runs that way. Like there were just certain times, okay, walking to school, get the snuff can out, beat it, put it in after a meal. And it's like what you said with Chris, like you're in a struggle, now you're married, now you have to have a conversation. Whereas before, no, I just need a good chew of tobacco,
what
that's
you
what
did.
I
That's
need.
right.
Or
Yeah,
just
yeah.
go have a cigarette and relax. And or whatever it is, a glass of wine or something to kind of, so it becomes part of that rhythm of life. Yeah.
I was just going to say, we talked about this in the Therapeutic Journey episode with Greg McFarland. He was talking about how... He's so smart.
He's like way beyond.
He was talking about how, just kind of walking us through like being in the shoes of a patient in programming, and kind of like what it feels like and looks like to be in each part of that process. And we talked a little bit about triggers and how when you're in treatment, especially in residential treatment, like almost the point is to be triggered so that you can kind of like take that and learn from it. And then I was talking to Michael Fanjoy, who's also been on the show, And he was saying, like, that's great. Like when people are triggered
Right.
in treatment, that is such an awesome
Opportunity,
opportunity.
yep.
And the phrase he used was like, it's like you're in a lab where you're experimenting and you get
Interesting.
to observe, like, oh, that made me feel triggered, or that triggered a craving that I have, and why did that happen? And let's look at it together. And
Yeah.
I think even if you're not in treatment or you're post treatment, taking those moments like, usually the smell of a cigarette wouldn't trigger me, but today it is. I wonder why that is. And
Yeah.
like just being like, well, that's an interesting observation. Like,
Yeah,
let
it
me
is,
think
isn't
about
it?
that a little bit.
And in life, even verbally, somebody like maybe a relationship challenge where someone says something, that can be a trigger to be like, it kind of irritates you. So that was such an insight to learn about triggers and not only addiction, but just in life. It was so good.
Yeah, just a little food for thought with Greg McFarland. So if you watch the episode, Greg McFarland worked for me when I was a staff member Teen Challenge, and we ran the greenhouses.
Did you?
Yeah.
I
So
didn't know that.
Not the best horticulturist, excellent counselor though. But I watched Greg McFarland come in, like a hot mess, man. Like didn't even he was
Yeah.
And now he's like this, he's got a master's degree, he's a licensed counselor, and he's just so smart and so insightful, and he helps so many people. It's just neat to see like that, like he actually really did that therapeutic journey to its fullest. Fullest
Well,
extent.
I talked about it before the show, so I'm going to give it to us now. But you walk in every day and talk about a trigger. And it's always a reminder to me when I come here and the privilege we have to serve together and help people and families and communities. But on our wall every day when I walk in Wilkerson Hall here at Raresburg, it talks about hope is found here, freedom lives here, and people's lives are changed when they leave here. And I hear the story of you, of Greg McFarland, of almost every guest we've had on here. It's such a powerful thing to see when the medical and the faith side come together, how freedom is brought. And it's such an encouraging thing. And I think for our listeners, as they listen to these podcasts, it's got to produce hope. I mean, that's part of what this is all about, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Any other recaps before we move on to our next section?
I mean, I could keep talking about my episodes, but I think we're good.
Well, we know they're the best, so just prioritize from there, and that makes it easy. You get down upon the unwashed masses with me and Amber,
right, I know.
but check his out
Pray
first.
for these two. They have to deal with me all week.
I'm feeling a trigger. I don't know why. But
It's funny.
All right. Well, our next section, as you guys know, and as our audience knows, we ask for questions at the end of our episode. If anybody has something rattling around in their brain, or if the episode brought up a question for them, or if there's just like a burning question in their head that they don't know where else to ask that question, we are not exactly experts, but we are surrounded by a lot of experts, and we have some insight, and so we love answering your questions. So I have a few questions here today that I thought that we could talk about. The first question is, can drug addiction lead to other mental health disorders?
Oh boy.
And I'll preface that again by saying, like, we are
go
not
get Michael
the experts.
and,
I know,
and Greg. Like,
Stephen's
let's.
office. But I think it does, and I'm not saying that this is the answer, but I will just kind of add to the discussion. I think it's interesting to consider that so many of the mental health disorders that we see are either triggered by the substance abuse, exacerbated by the substance abuse, or sometimes people self-medicate with a substance because of a pre-existing substance abuse. So we do see that a lot, for sure. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think it's a challenge that we have because we're not a mental health facility per se. We have the ability to help where we can, and it's hard to try to figure out where that falls in place. Because for me, I mean, if you were to ask people when I was in my mess what I was like, they would have told you he was crazy, because I was, and maybe I still am a little bit, but I really didn't have mental health. I was never really diagnosed with mental health, but the use of drugs led me into a mental state that I couldn't control.
Right.
And I think we deal with that a lot here more than actual mental health, because there is a lot of mental health issues. But because people come here who are generally who need help with drug addiction, usually it's because they were addicted to something that started bringing out some mental health issues that they had, or started them to become kind of mental, and then hopefully with the correction of their use, that those mental health problems go away.
Yeah, I'm certainly not an expert, and I would say that. But this morning I had a great illustration. So you walk out of your garage. I was down on my bottom deck going down there before I came in, and you open the sliding door and you go out, and what's all over my head and messing up my hair, which really upset me.
Yeah. It looks great today, by the
Well,
way.
I just do one quick thing and
Yeah.
it's all good. But
Jealous.
I ran into a spider web.
Yeah.
And I think that it just made me think, as you were talking about, that's how it is. Like, it causes so many things. I mean, again, as we were saying in the first segment, like relationships, finances, legally, all the things that go into that. And it's just like this cobweb. And I think the picture that I have in mind is, you know what, I can knock that cobweb down, which I did. And I wiped it off my head and I'm good to go. Well, guess what will be there tomorrow? There's going to be another cobweb.
Yeah.
And I think the key to removing that cobweb and a part of our journey of freedom is like, I got to find that spider. If I kill the spider, not to say there won't be another spider, but if I kill that spider, then guess what? Maybe there's not going to be a cobweb if there's not a spider.
That's a great illustration.
That was pretty good.
It made me think too that in the episode that I mentioned earlier with Heather, we talked about the mental health toll it can take on family members too. I mean, Heather and I both talked about how, we struggled with anxiety, and I know I struggled with depression in light of our husband's addiction. And so there's mental health ramifications for the family members too, and we don't always consider it that way.
Yeah,
So
that's so true.
yeah, those are good insights. The next question is, are there effective treatments for addiction? I think we would all say a
Well, I
resounding
hope so. Or
yes.
Well,
I don't know what we're doing.
Yeah,
yeah, exactly, right.
I mean, I think it depends on there's lots of treatments for addiction, and everybody's treatment is going to be a little different. I don't think you can say one is greater than the other. There are lots of tools. Teen Challenge started as an abstinence-based program, which I still think has tons of value. I was an abstinence-based guy.
Can you just clarify, like, what exactly do you mean by abstinence?
So I didn't use any medical.
MAT. I'll use one of the acrostics I've learned. See, I'm learning even as a host. Like,
so
that's great.
I didn't use any medication treatment to help me.
And the medications usually we're talking about are Suboxone, methadone sometimes.
Vivitrol.
Vivitrol, yeah.
So there's and they all have great value. For me, I didn't need those, but that was in 2007. So that was 15 years ago.
But that was not 15 years ago. 2007.
Was it?
That's
15,
crazy.
It was 15 years ago.
It
wasn't
is.
Okay,
You're right.
I'm
I'm
thinking
just
like,
saying,
is my math that
my
bad?
brain is not allowing me to believe that to be true.
No, it was 15 years. I know. But the use of buprenorphine or Suboxone, Vivitrol, which is great, which is kind of like a shot that is non-narcotic and can keep you, blocks opiates. Because today, like fentanyl, when I was using it, just had come out, right? You heard about it, but no one really knew much about it. The only thing I knew is it was killing people, and I wanted it, which is mental health.
Where that
Right,
really
right.
goes together,
That's
right?
where my mind's at that time. But it's so rampant now that if you don't have like Narcan to bring, Narcan is saving lives left and right. If you don't have Vivitrol or Suboxone, these types of these tools and medications to use, it's going to make recovery much more difficult.
This is a little bit off the question, but the field is changing so rapidly, and it's important that we stay open to changing our methodology sometimes, or allowing different methodologies for different people who may be struggling with different things that weren't, like you said, weren't really a thing 15 years ago. We're in a different place now.
Yeah, and what I would say, one of the things that I said for years when I pastored was the message never changed, but the methods do.
Yeah.
And I think that's the beauty that I've seen. Being a part of Pennsylvania Adult and Teen Challenge for so many years, as a board member, as a supporter, I think our best days are right now, because I think what we were saying is that no one's addiction is identical. So we're blessed to be able to individualize the need and support for those who come, men and women. And I just see the strength of that, where yes, there's faith-based, the Word of God, but there's also the medical treatment to help them safely transition. And what I also love is that we can help people take a step. Back in the day when we had a couple hundred people coming through in a year, hey, it was 9 months faith-based, or sorry, we can't help you. And I love now that Come for Detox, they can come to the short-term program. It's a step for them taking a step not only towards sobriety, but toward knowing God personally. And I think it's a great strength of our ministry today.
Well, I think, go ahead, Shawn. Sorry.
Well, I mean, I would totally agree with you. We were just in Newsweek, and they ranked, recovery centers in Pennsylvania. We were number 3. We were from number 10. We went to number 3. And if you look on that, and Chris pointed this out too, that we're the only faith-based organization there. And it's vital. I mean, if we don't get involved in understanding Suboxone and these methodologies without changing our message,
That's right.
Because we don't do that.
That's right.
We're
Exactly
faith-based.
right.
We love Jesus. We want you to find Jesus when you come here. But if we don't, some organization like us has to get involved in those methodologies, because if not, there'll never be a faith-based organization in those
right.
methodologies. Someone has to get in there.
It's not an either or.
That's what excites me about working here, because we're willing to jump into those methodologies and use them properly without changing our message.
Yeah, that's exactly right.
Good. Well, I think to sum it up, to answer that question, are there effective treatments for addiction? There absolutely are effective treatments for addiction. You are living proof of that. We have so many people on our staff, people that we know, are graduates of our program that are thriving and doing well. And
maybe this would be the time, Amber, just if someone's listening and saying, well, that's encouraging, that's good. What's the first step? What should I do if I know someone or myself? What would be the first step?
Pick up the phone and call us.
That's right.
Yep. 844-888-8085. We always put that in the show notes. You're welcome to share that with friends, family, people you think might need it. People you think don't need it. I mean, everybody, knows someone, even if they aren't aware that they know someone.
Yeah,
that
and when
needs
they
help.
call, that's the nice thing about it. They will talk with you. They'll have a conversation, and it's not going to be a one-size-fits-all and, hey, here's what you need. They're going to process that with you and help you find a solution.
All right, our next question is, what is detox?
Oh, why? Okay, well.
I'm looking at you, Shawn.
I'll look at okay. Well, I mean, detox is a. Now, I don't want to say it's a form of treatment, because I don't think there's a lot of treatment in detox. Treatment is detox is like a precursor to treatment, right? When you are on opiates, on this day and age, you drink alcohol, you're on benzodiazepines like Xanax or Valium, the withdrawals and the side effects of not using them anymore can be detrimental. So the goal for detox is one, we want to get this person into recovery, but they're not even going to be ready to even try to process and start using their mind, meeting with a counselor, because recovery is found in those areas there. We want to just medically kind of get them stable, and that's generally 5 to 7 days. You'll come in, we'll assess the need of where you're at. We'll make sure, because people come in, they're very high maintenance when it comes to detox. They usually have physical ailments. They're already on medications because, they're living life, and they're addicted to some substance that can cause detrimental problems if the side effects really kick in while they're not on them. So our goal is to kind of stabilize them, and we use multiple different methodologies.
Well, maybe start with the abstinence one, because that's what you did.
Yeah.
So, can you give 1 minute on your detox?
So let me tell you, my detox was in jail, and they gave me nothing. Now, I wasn't on a lot of medications. I didn't take benzos, because benzos, that detox can kill you. That you can have grand mal seizures.
And alcohol too, right?
And
It's
alcohol
very
too,
dangerous,
very dangerous, right? And even fentanyl. I mean, you can get pretty darn sick to the point where
Did you say
might.
Alcohol?
Yeah, alcohol.
And fentanyl.
And
Yeah,
fentanyl.
I was going to say, I would just explain that a little bit, because that's a.
Well, alcohol, I mean, you can get seizures and tremors really bad to the point where you can have now I'm not the doctor. I work with a lot of people in detox, but almost like you could have
Body
like a heart
becomes
attack.
so used to it, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So now I didn't have alcohol. It was just opiates. So, I was basically stuck in a jail cell, and they were like, oh, well, good luck, And at that time, I mean, you probably could do that, but this day and age, number one, if someone does have some mental health problems, their mind isn't going to be stable enough to have to deal with that withdrawal. People will hurt themselves. So nowadays, when they come to us, one, we don't want them going through that pain, right? That's very difficult. It's very challenging. So we will provide them the right medications, whether it's Suboxones for opiates, and then for benzos, they'll actually keep them on the benzos, but they'll taper them properly,
Right.
so that way it's out of their system and they can move on to the next
Something
thing.
that I learned that was really interesting, just kind of along the lines of the neurobiology of addiction, is that when you're using the substance, your brain is telling you you will die if you do not
Yeah,
use that
pretty much. Yep.
substance, and you have to use it. And when the withdrawal process kicks in, it's reinforcing that. Like, if I don't use this drug, I'm going to die, and I can tell because I feel like I'm going to die.
Right.
And that becomes a huge barrier to treatment, because people say, like, I'm not going to treatment because I'm going to go through withdrawal and I'm going to die.
Yeah.
When you can offer someone a detox program, you're helping to alleviate some of that, and helping them rest assured, like, you're going to survive the detox process. We're going to help you get through it. And even if not to that extreme, like you were saying, the discomfort, like, I really don't want to go through the discomfort of withdrawal. Well, we can help you with some medications to get you through that point, to get you to the other side where you can really be prepared and start going through that.
Yeah, that's
process.
usually the challenge. Nobody wants to go through that withdrawal point, because you know what you're about to get involved with. And when I was out of money and I had nothing, it was either figure out a way to get more money and get your drugs so that you don't have to deal with that. And I didn't really, like, no one was, there wasn't, nowadays you drive down every street corner, there's a pink sign on stapled to a telephone pole saying, if you need treatment, here you go. Well, that wasn't like that when I was going through it. So I didn't even really understand what treatment was. And that's why, people are like, man, why do they keep committing crimes? Why do they keep doing these things? Well,
Right.
because we don't know any better. And our brain's telling us, like, listen, if you don't get this drug, you're going to die.
Right.
And we just don't want to die.
Yeah, and one of the quotes that you often hear in the church among Christians, we're fearfully and wonderfully made.
Yeah.
Sometimes we don't even know what that reference, where it's about, but it's about we've been created in a wonderful way by God. I mean, I've learned it just obviously with some of the things I've been through, like losing my left eye, losing my left leg, but even your brain. Like, since my accident 8 years ago, I have no sense of smell, because the smell sensor in your brain, which is, think of the computers and stuff we have, and then think of your brain. And because of the injury, multiple concussions, even though I was wearing a helmet, the neurologist said, Bryan, you're probably never going to get your smell back. Now, again, can God do anything? Sure, he can. But I'm probably going to live, and there's upside to that. And, I only see half the diaper. I don't smell any of it. I should change all of them. But I'm going to let you do it because I love you, and I want you to learn. But when you think about addiction, how you keep injuring your brain, and then that fear of, if I stop, I'm going to die. That is, I think, again, the power for our listeners to say, we're going to help them safely find freedom and get to a place where now they can think about that part of the journey too, which is your thoughts, to avoid those triggers and to move on in freedom. But
yeah, I think that's where, when we talk about renewing, this is where I think the faith part really comes into play, about renewing your mind.
Yes.
Because my mind was a mess. And I know some guys, like even Phil, who's coming tonight to speak, to share his story, his mind was a mess too. But we renewed our mind with the Word of God. Right?
Amen.
We I still, to this day, I mean, just this morning, I was taking
That's
my
right.
time,
Thank
sitting
God.
out in this morning sun, reading the Word of God,
Yep.
because that's what renews my mind daily. It refreshes my mind. It puts this glorious, life-giving word into and that's what's restored me.
But your mind now is in a healthier place, as Amber was saying, to receive that.
That's
word.
right.
Whereas
Right.
at first, like I remember, like when I lost my leg, they were saying mirror therapy. That's a medical thing that you can do.
What is
So
it?
I'm battling
Mirror
these.
therapy.
Mirror?
It's
Oh
so
yeah, mirror
fascinating.
therapy. I'm battling.
Do you like stand in front of the mirror and look at
Well,
yourself?
no.
Because I was going to say, boy, I got a lot of therapy there.
Well, I'll take 2 minutes and explain it. I mean, you have, as an amputee, you have phantom pain, because again, your brain is a
doesn't
powerful
know.
thing.
Yeah.
So my leg is cut off here. So that nerve that goes to my ankle, it was bizarre. Like 8 months after the accident, my ankle would itch. I don't even know where my ankle is. Like, could I go find it and itch it?
Right.
Or a hot steak like is burning through my calf. It was miserable. And I was on a heavy drug to avoid that. And talk about fear. The doctor was saying, Bryan, no, we'd like to get you off this drug because it's very addictive and it's temporary. And I'm thinking, no, wait, if I have a hot steak going through my calf
Right.
at 2 a.m. and I can't sleep, what's it going to be like when I'm off this drug? And it was that great fear. And so there, I lost my wife, I lost my leg. I'm sitting there telling me about mirror therapy. What, mirror therapy? Okay, whatever. I wasn't even paying attention. My daughter-in-law, we looked it up on Google, did it again. You take a mirror that you'd put on the back of your door, to check your hair. your clothes, whatever, and you just place it like between your legs like this. And I would do it every night for 20 minutes. So this mirror would mirror my leg. If I'm wearing shorts, I'm wearing shorts on this leg. If I'm wearing, and you just have conversation, you look at it, and you're tricking your brain.
Wow.
Can I tell you that
Fascinating.
that heavy drug that I was on, within 3 weeks, I'm off that drug because my brain had been tricked by the mirror. Now, what if I just said, well, I'm just going to pray and I'm going to believe that this, and that's okay. We need to have that faith. But here was a way that's a solution. That's exactly right. And I think that's so true in addiction. And it's powerful.
Oh, that was cool, man.
It was life-changing.
That was very,
Yeah.
yeah. I'm going to go home and just start using mirrors.
Well, there you go.
Yeah, right? I don't
You
know.
just
I'm
look
gonna-
in that
yeah,
mirror.
that's it,
Just
man.
tell yourself how good you are. That's going to renew your mind.
I do that anyway. So I'm just kidding.
Remember, his shows are the best. Make sure you listen to them first.
We are getting short in time, so I'm going to transition us into our wholeness habit.
Oh, boy.
Every episode we talk about a habit that's in our lives that's helping us bring wholeness to our lives. So it can be a book you're reading, a new exercise routine. I think in our first episode, you told us that you were
Just started.
started working out
Yeah.
and you only had one towel hanging on your treadmill,
Yes.
which is impressive. Any more clothes added to your...
No, actually, the treadmill is completely cleared off.
Oh,
The weight
wow.
bench is cleared off. We bought a total gym, and that's cleared off. So we've
Nice.
been really putting a lot of effort and work into that.
Bodily exercise profits a little. 1 Timothy
Yeah,
4:8.
it does. I just want to be, I have children. I want to live as long as I can. And I know God orders our steps, and he's already got it when I'm going to
Yeah, that's right.
see him. But, I want to be healthy. I feel that eating well, working out, I'm very into neurobiology right now. I know me,
Does it involve mirrors?
it's going to.
Yeah.
So I listen to Andrew Huberman. I'll give him a plug for his podcast. It's an excellent podcast, and he talks about the brain and exercise and the value of eating right and all these things, how you can trick your brain and all these things you do.
Yeah, it's
because
interesting.
here's a stigma that I really can't stand. Because you're saved, because you're a Christian, every day is going to be perfect.
Shoot.
You're not going to have down days. You're not going to be tired. You're not going to be triggered. Let me tell you, I feel like I have it worse now probably than I ever did. But, the enemy's trying to get to you. You're fighting life.
Jesus
right?
got tired.
That's right,
Jesus
man.
got hungry.
Right. So, I want to try to do the things that can help me through those things. And yes, I pray, and yes, I read my Bible, but there are also other things that you can do that obviously God, if he's sovereign over everything, it's created for us to do. And one of them is exercise.
Yeah.
So we've been putting me and my wife have been putting a lot of effort into that. And so that's
Well,
kind of
I'll
what I'm
tag right onto that because my wholeness habit is planning. We all have a schedule. We all make different money, income, but you know what we all have the same? We all have 168 hours this week. Yeah. No, you're not going to change that.
That's all 168.
That's it. In fact, I'll give a little tip. If you, how many would say, oh, I'd like 13 months in a year? Someone said, no, 12's too many. Can I get it down to 11? But you know what you'd have to do to get 13 months? Wake up 1/2 hour earlier. You said you have a time schedule. Every day you wake up. So if you wake up every day at, let's say, 6:30, and you want an extra month in your year, wake up every day at 6. That'll give you that kind. That's amazing, isn't it? And so when I think about the cobweb and going all the way life gets messy, like 168 hours, for me, it's just planning. Like on a Monday, when my kids were growing up, my wife and I, we did a family meeting every Monday. And we just talked about our schedule and the games and it's just, whatever. I mean, mowing the grass, balancing the checkbook, whatever you're doing. And so I think just planning and thinking about managing how we're going to manage these 168 hours, because there's always a curveball. Like you said, 9:30, it kind of goes crazy. You come here, we have a plan. Well, throw that plan out the window because I got to do this. And that's a part of life. But I think thinking ahead and planning your day, that's in my life, that's been a powerful thing. So that's my habit. Just look at your schedule. Take a minute, plan ahead, have some solitude, and it's good.
Very good. Well, my wholeness habit this week is I am trying to slow down. I, for as long as I can remember, have been just like, I'm always rushing. If I'm walking somewhere, I'm walking fast. If I'm driving somewhere, I'm driving fast. If I am
Do you eat
getting
fast?
in or out, I do. I eat so fast. If I'm getting in or out of my car or whatever, and I'm dropping my keys, I'm forgetting stuff, I'm leaving things, wherever. And I've been learning more and trying to be better at practicing mindfulness. And when I just slow down and take my time and enjoy the moment, I have so much more clarity. My stress level just reduces immediately. So even in the simple things like parking my car in the parking lot, getting all my stuff together, getting out of the car, walking into the building. You see, you're just like taking a deep breath.
I was going to say, can we do that? Can we just like, wow,
See, doesn't it
I feel
so
the
much
piece
better?
of amber coming all over.
I talk fast too.
Okay.
But that's my habit. I'm trying to be more conscious of slowing down, taking my
Yeah. time,
being in the
Mindful.
moment when I'm in the moment. And
Yeah, that's good.
And yeah, it's been really good. So
No, that's funny. I was listening to I listened to this coach because I coach my kids' basketball team, and I try to learn from other coaches. And he says you want to play fast, but you want to play under control. So if you're playing fast but you're not under control, that's worse than playing slow.
Yeah.
He says you want to play fast, but you want to play under control, and that's
It's
kind
a
of like
tender
what you're saying.
balance,
Yeah,
isn't
what
it?
you're
Yeah.
saying. Like we have to go, we got to get things done, but we want to do it under control. So I'm going to
Being in the moment, I think it's a powerful thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's
Sometimes
good.
we're always living in the future of what we've got to do that we miss the moment. That's a great thought.
That is
Yeah.
great, actually.
Well, speaking of the moment, we have had so many wonderful moments on this show so far. We're going to put a pin in season 1 and start transitioning into season 2. We're already starting to schedule those episodes and plan for them. So we've got more excellent content coming up. As always, if you've got questions for us, please
Or
send them.
topics, I think.
Or topics,
Man,
yes.
topics would be great.
Absolutely. Please send them to us at AboveBeyond@paatc.org. Again, that email address is in our show notes.
Or
and
people that they think should come on.
That's
I mean,
right.
They
If
might
you
know
have
somebody like hey, that would be a great person to interview or have on.
Yeah,
that's
if you have
right.
recommendations for guests, anything that you'd like to hear us talk about, we would love to hear from you. So please shoot us an email. But that's it for our last episode of the first season.
Hard to
Thank
believe.
you. Yeah.
Here, let's try this right.
Oh, are we going to do it? Yeah.
Bam.
We're enjoying the moment.
All right. Thank you so much for joining us. We'll see you again in season 2.
Very good.
Thank you for joining us. The Above and Beyond Recovery podcast is a production of Pennsylvania Adult and Teen Challenge. If you or a loved one needs help with addiction, call us now at 844-888-8085 or find us online at paatc.org. That information is also in our show notes. Join us next time as we continue the conversation.